We'll be starting with the Essential Commodities Act 1955. This act is a relatively small act, and the sections which are important is very obvious and very predictable what is going to come in the exam. From the name itself, the government of India can notify certain goods to be essential commodities. When we say essential, means these are important from public importance. They are supplies important, we want it to be produced and we want it to be available at fair prices. So the government of India states in the schedule that there are a certain important commodities which are essential for public interest, and then they regulate that essential commodity. So if I'm a producer or a manufacturer of essential commodities, or a distributor or a supplier or a dealer in essential commodities, this act will be applicable to me. So let's look at the object of the act. First, why was this act made? So its origin of this act was government of India wanted certain goods, considered them to be essential for the defense of India, to provide it to our army, to all our people who are there at the borders. So we said that certain goods should be available and to them so that we can provide it to them. Now, with advent of time, apart from defense, we also realize that in other areas also, like you and me, also essentially require some goods and they should be available. If there is a shortage, or if there is artificial scarcity created, or if someone is trying to manipulate the production, this law will apply and will punish them. So, if we read this act, the Essential Commodities Act is an act passed by the Parliament of India. It was established to ensure the delivery of certain commodities or products, the supply of which, if obstructed by hoarding or by black marketing, would affect the normal life of people. For example, you tell me, if today the producers try to manipulate the production or the prices of food grains, would it affect us, you and me, yes or no? Yes. Government of India recently introduced certain more goods to be essential commodities. After the COVID times, they have said that hand sanitizers is also an essential commodity. Face mask, the three-ply mask, is also an essential commodity, and therefore its production should be enough. It should be there for distribution and it should be available at fair prices. Even food grains, certain kind of medicines, that is your drugs, your fuel, etc. Tell me, is a mobile phone an essential commodity where your day-to-day life will be affected? Now, what you think government wants to regulate all these laptops, mobile phones, your other things, your car? Now, government says we don't regulate every single thing. We let it be self-regulated on basis of demand and supply, what is there prevalent in the market. So all these will not be touched. Very few goods, government has kept it under their control. So when I say few goods, there are approximately nine commodities in which this act will be hit. We will see which are those. Recently, there was a modification in the Essential Commodities Amendment Act 2020, which were your farm laws which were brought in. But there has been some kind of resentment by the industry for which this amendment has been put to hold. Now, the Essential Commodities Act was enacted in 1955 and is used by the government to regulate three things. You have to know the word uh, PSD, okay, or DSP. Your DSP is your distribution, supply, and production of essential commodities. So, what is the object of the act? Is to regulate the distribution, supply, production of essential commodities. The object of the act again is to control or to regulate production, supply and distribution of essential commodities which are essential to public interest, and it is important that these goods are available at fair prices and it is equally distributed among the people. It shouldn't be hoarded in hands of few. So, is the object of the act clear? What is the object of the act? The object of the act is to ensure easy availability of essential commodities to consumers. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Second, to protect consumers from exploitation by unscrupulous traders, by certain dubious persons who try to manipulate or who are acting illegally, so to protect consumers from them, because since it is essential, people try to raise the prices of this. Like we had seen in the COVID times, people were trying to raise the prices of hand sanitizers. Government tried to say that since it is essential commodities, they have limited the pricing of it. Then for regulation and control, as we saw in the definition, it's regulation and control of P PDP, production, distribution, uh,
It's a S.
PS, okay, production, supply. So, all of these will come in the same line. So, you can say production, supply, distribution, PSD, okay. Even pricing, you can add it of essential commodities. I mean, everything with respect to essential commodities is regulated under this act by the government. Now, what is it essential for? For maintaining proper supplies, for ensuring that there is equitable, fair distribution and it is available at fair prices. Is the object of the act here?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, first, this act is all about essential commodities. Now, what is essential? What is not essential? We need to know that. Accordingly, if I am a manufacturer, I want to know whether this act is applicable to me or no. So the word essential commodity is nowhere defined in the entire act. Is a definition given for essential commodities?
Yes.
No. Instead, it has said that section 2A of the act states that an essential commodity means a commodity specified in schedule of this act. So they have said simply that whatever commodities have been specified in the schedule is your essential commodities. So we will have to go to look at the schedule. What is the list of the items given? All of those are your essential commodities which will be regulated as per this act. So isn't it important to look at the schedule? So your schedule contains around 9 commodities. How many commodities? It contains around 9 commodities. So it's out here. Now the schedule, section 2A said that all those commodities mentioned in the schedule are your essential commodities. So let's see what the government has said. Tell me one thing, is a mobile phone essential commodities after reading this? Answer is no. Okay, so they have given you drugs. Now drugs is basically what are coming under your drugs and cosmetic acts. So the definition is given there. So your pharma products can come here, pharmaceutical products, medicines, your fertilizers, foodstuff, that is including oil seeds, oils, yarn, petroleum, raw jute, your food crops, fruits, vegetables, fodder, cotton, and this is the latest entry that has been made. Face mask and hand sanitizers. This was the after COVID they have brought it into the Essential Commodities Act that a face mask and hand sanitizers are also essential commodities. So you will have to, they can ask you name a few essential commodities. So if you go to see in a day-to-day life, we require now face mask hand sanitizers. We require food, we require clothes, we require medicines. To have food, you also require fertilizers. In order to move around, you require petrol, uh, and the other clothing stuff like your raw jute and your hand yarn, cotton, etc. Is this clear?
Yes.
Yeah. So your schedules provides you these 9 items which are covered under your hand sanitizer, as covered as your essential commodity. Now coming to the history of the act. How did this act come into force? What was the background of this act? It is a recent act or it's an old act? It's a recent act or an old act? Old act. So basically the Essential Commodities Act 1955, it came into effect on 1st April 1955. But its history, it has a history dated from 1939. 1939. It started where government of India said that there are some goods that we need to provide to our defense, for our defense purpose. We need, for mandatorily, it should be available to the army, navy, airport, whoever there at the borders. So a list of items were given and stated to be essential, and it should be available for the defense of India. So Defense of India Act was made. The government of India made certain rules to control the production, supply, and distribution of essential commodities under the Defense of India Act, uh, which ceased to have effect in 1946. Now, just do you think we require only regulation when it's for defense, or even otherwise we require essential commodities to be regulated? What do you think? Even otherwise, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. So then later we realized that it was a very good act, and it regulated all these essential commodities. So then they passed a ordinance. They said, and they passed a ordinance. So it was, however, considered necessary to that control in respect of certain essential commodities for human beings should continue in general interest of public. Therefore, immediately, ordinance is a temporary law that is passed by either the governor or the president. So they have passed a essential supplies temporary powers ordinance 1946. So since this ceased to have effect in 1946, we said we can't allow it to stop. We wanted to continue. So as a temporary law, we quickly made it 1946. Okay, which was later, the Essential Commodities Ordinance 1955 was brought in on 26 January 1955. Now tell me one thing. This was ordinances. Now ordinances are like temporary laws. They have a certain time limit. Okay. We needed to make a full-fledged act with respect to this. Yes or no? Because we want something of a permanent nature. So then this ordinance was subsequently replaced. This ordinance was subsequently replaced and an act was made, which is your act that we are studying, your Essential Commodities Act 1955. Is this clear?
Yes.
So right from the defense, then we realized that it should continue. This act should continue. So we passed ordinances 1946, then an ordinance in 1955, and then we said let's have a permanent act in nature, and then we replaced all these ordinances and we brought in your Essential Commodities Act 1955. So this is your history of the act. Now in this there was a case law for essential commodities. This was a case law which has also been asked in your exam previously. It's a PEQ. What is PEQ? Your past examination question. So they said, is tea a foodstuff? See, let's understand from where did it come. Essential commodities, they have given foodstuff. Yes or no?
Yes.
So foodstuff is essential commodity. If tea becomes a foodstuff, it will be regulated by this act. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So then the question came up, a question was posed that whether tea is foodstuff. And because if foodstuff is covered under essential commodities, it's considered as an essential commodity. And therefore its regulation come under this act. So is tea a foodstuff? What do you think? So this was the question brought in because they wanted to bring tea manufacturers also under this act. Whereas the tea manufacturers went up in court, appealed in court that tea is not a foodstuff. Tea is not foodstuff. It is a beverage. It is something that you drink. Okay. It cannot be considered to be food. Do you eat food or you drink tea? Do you eat tea or drink tea?
Drink.
Drink, okay. So all of us also do the same thing. So that is what they said, and the case went in favor of Samuel versus Union of India, where he argued that tea is not foodstuff, and Supreme Court held that tea is not a foodstuff. It is actually a beverage. Normally, foodstuff nourishes the body, whereas tea neither nourishes the body nor sustains any or promotes any growth. Tea leaves are also not eaten. Okay, foodstuff will not include tea as it is neither in the form of leaves nor in the form of a beverage and does not go into the preparation of food either. Okay, or to make it more palatable and digestible. So simple common sense case law, yes or no? So Samuel versus Union of India, tea is not a foodstuff. Second, came to few other definitions. One of the definition we have done, which is the most important, which is your essential commodities. Section 2A, which state that they have not defined essential commodity. They simply said all those commodities specified in the schedule are essential commodities. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Then they go on to tell you section 2 and define a few other things also. One is your sugar and other one is your collector. Now this we can just have a just read kind of a thing. It's not too important. Collector. Now who is a collector? Here under this act, an officer is called as a collector. So it includes an additional collector, whatever collector is it includes, and such other officer not below the rank of a sub-divisional officer. So he's like an officer. And what is his work? What does a collector do? So in the act, you will see that a collector has certain roles that any person appointed who is like an officer under the act to perform certain functions as designated and appointed for him. Is this clear? So a collector includes an additional character and such other officer not below the rank of a sub-divisional officer. So we can say that he's at a certain post, a high-end post, who is going to perform the work of a collector given under the act. Second, they have defined what do you mean by sugar. Now, how do you define what do you mean by sugar? So they said any form of sugar containing more than 90% of sucrose, okay, including sugar candy, is called as sugar. Now why have they given sugar? Because under the act they have given that for essential commodity they stated how do you regulate sugar, what is the pricing, certain points which we will come ahead. So they have also defined what do you mean by sugar. Then they also said certain other kinds of sugar. Khansari sugar, bhura sugar, crushed sugar, any sugar in crystallized or powdered form. Sugar in the process in vacuum, pan sugar factory or raw sugar. All of this is sugar. So tell me one thing, anything which has 90% or more than 90% sucrose is sugar. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Tell me, bura sugar, bura is bad. No, so here this is giving types of sugar. Crushed sugar, okay, or any other kind, khansari sugar. So many different sugars we didn't know except for pan also. On pan also they put some sugar which is in powdered form. I suppose it's that. Clear till here? We can move ahead with the main provisions of the act. The most important section in your entire Essential Commodities Act 1955 is your section 3. 3 and subparts of 3. Is this clear? So this is the most important provision. So which section you have to know for Essential Commodities Act? Section 3. Okay. So this gives the powers of the central government to control production, supply and distribution of essential commodities. Now the thing is, why would the government control PSD of essential commodities? You think out of the blue for no reason they will come and issue notifications, issue orders, or there would be a purpose, a rationale? There would be a purpose.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What is that purpose is what is given here. So they've given you these 3 cases where the central government will exercise their power of control over essential commodities. So let's read. The central government has vested with the power to issue orders to regulate or control or prohibit the PSD, the production, supply and distribution of essential commodities. Now, under what circumstance will the government do that? So, they have given you the following circumstances. How many circumstances they have given you? 3. First one, if government feels that they need to increase or maintain the supply of any essential commodities. If they feel that the supply has gone too low, they will immediately order that you all have to manufacture, you all are not manufacturing, why are you not manufacturing? So this can be an order to maintain certain supplies. Second, for securing equitable distribution and availability of essential commodities. Now, if you go to see, when it came to this Remdesivir or certain medicines which were there important for COVID. Okay. Now we know that drugs, this Drugs and Cosmetic Act also they covered certain kind of medicine. Don't you think Remdesivir was an important medicine at that time during COVID times?
Yes.
Yes. So procuring that, it was just maybe, let's say it was hoarded by a certain person in Gujarat, and he was saying that I will give it to people in Gujarat only. And in Maharashtra, we needed it urgently. So can the government, central government, step in and tell the people in Gujarat that see right now you don't need it that much. Please provide and provide the distribution and distribute the medicine here also. So order can come in public interest. And third, for securing any essential commodity for the defense of India. So whenever there is a war or there is a battle, we require certain commodities to go to the army, to go to the officers. So 3 reasons, and now I'm just going to highlight it which you should know. So section 3 says when can the central government step in? First, to increase or maintain supplies, yes or no? Second, to provide equitable distribution of essential commodities, and the third is your defense of India. So you can remember the word ESED, seed, okay, whatever. So there are 3 reasons, purposes when the central government can step in. Now, what kind of orders can the central government give? So it's an extension of section 3. saying that central government can give orders when there is ACD, supply, defense, and E is for what? Equitable distribution. When government feels that this all needs to be done, they can pass orders. What kind of orders can the government pass? Are you all understanding what I'm asking? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, what kind of orders government can order? Simple. If I am the government, I will tell the government no artificial shortage, make proper production, make proper distribution, make proper supply. The storage they can pass with respect to where it will be stored, the transportation, the licensing, cancellation of the licensing, all of those, anything which you see with the business aspect, everything will come there. So I'll just highlight a few points. You should know this. So this has been section 3 extension. So orders can be given. What kind of orders? Regulating the licenses, regulating the storage, transportation, distribution, prohibiting withholding, then requiring any person who is holding the stock, like I told you, he's holding it in Gujarat, to release the goods, to sell the goods to the government. Government can also procure these essential commodities for regulating any kind of transaction which is likely to be harmful or detrimental to public interest. Government can stop those transactions. If we feel that a person is holding the goods, we can entry search into the premises and even seize the articles if we feel that there is anything violation of any law. Is this clear? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. One of the powers of the government, one of the orders, the government can simply state, okay, so the government of India, and let's say I'm the manufacturer of essential commodity, can the government tell me that sell it to them? The government in public interest can state that you have to sell it to us, certain goods. Now this government, very rarely they will exercise this rights, but in public interest they can do that. Yes or no? Yeah. So section 3, subsection 3 vests powers in the central government to deal with the pricing. Now we are coming to a very important part, which is pricing of essential commodities, particularly when these commodities are being sold to the central government or state government in compliance of an order. So government is ordered, sell to us. We are going to buy it from you. You have to give it to us at a certain price. Now let me give you an example. Let's say there is a cancer drug and the government feels that there is a shortage in the market, and the manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers are kind of playing around and trying to take advantage of the people's misery. Government will simply say, sell it to us, we will manage it. Can they do that? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the government will simply say, sell to me. But when the government is saying that sell to me, don't you think the government has to give them price, a fair price for the goods? Because we also have to see this is also doing business. We have to protect their rights also. Should the government, when they take compulsory acquisition of certain commodities, should the government pay them a fair price? Yes or no? Yeah. Now the price, how it will be determined, is provided under section 3 subsection 2F. Under which section? 3 subsection 2F. They have given you different ways, certain techniques of coming out to the price. So between them and these two, they are coming out to a fair price. Firstly, the government tells that ये जो product है मुझे 30 rupees में दे दो. Give it to me for rupees 30. There is a possibility you might agree. Yes or no? If you are
Yes, sir.
if you are a manufacturer and I tell you that I am trying to take these goods from you at rupees 30, it is for the defense of India. Will you sell it to me? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So if you have agreed to it, so that's the agreed price where both the party have consented and come to common terms and have decided a single price, you can go ahead with that. Second, there could be another thing where the person says, see, I'm giving it to you, but give it to me at market price. It is possible that the government might buy it at market price also. Yes or no? This is another thing. One is either agreed price or the market price. Ideally, the manufacturer will demand a market price. Let's say he will say that there is a market price is rupees 50. Manufacturer will ask for the market price. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. So that's the first thing, that the government can ask for a market price. But the government will try to negotiate and say that, come on, just lower the price, let's come to mutual consensus. They might try to bring down the price. But let's say the government is saying, no, we don't want to buy at the market price. And they could not come to a common agreement also. They couldn't come. Then there is a kind of a disagreement. The disagreement continues. Then who will prevail? Whose decision will prevail? Whose decision will prevail? The government's decision will prevail. So they call it as a controlled price. The controlled price where no such agreement can be reached. So simple सी चीज है, it will happen something like this. It's pretty funny. So the government will say that this is 70 rupees. So government will say हमें 30 rupees में दे दो. Please. Government is saying 30 rupees में दे दो. And let's say the person agrees. So it will be said that we had a agreement on the agreed price. We struck the deal at the agreed price. Yes or no?
Yes.
Then simply, if the agreement could not be done, we could not come to an agreement, then the government will say हम लोग को इसमें 30 rupees में दे दो, and they will remove the word please. So then this will be called as with what price?
Control.
This is like the controlled price, where government is controlling the price and saying this is the price, whatever. So it's pretty simple. Section 3, subsection 3, that the central government has the power to decide the pricing. The pricing will be decided in any of the three categories which is given under your section 3, subsection 2F. Now, coming to another important point is, we did section 3, subsection 3. Now we are doing section 3, subsection 3A. Section 3, subsection 3A, which is talking about procuring goods in emergency, fixing the price of essential commodities in case of emergency. Let's say there is a time like COVID, or there is a war broken out, or there is some kind of a famine, some kind of drought, and we say that there is an emergency, we cannot, really this market price cannot prevail, we have to fix the price. So that order will come under which section? Section 3, subsection 3A. So this order will come in the form of an emergency provision to meet out certain situations in a particular locality. It empowers the central government to direct the price at which foodstuff in any locality will be sold to the general public. Okay. Now, before directing anything, it might take in opinions and of the people of the locality. The notification issued by the government for the above effect shall be in force for a period of 3 months only. Tell me one thing, is emergency going to be there forever, or it is a temporary phase?
Temporary.
So since it's temporary, so how do you define the temporary time phase? So then they said that whatever order is given, the notification issued will be in force for only 3 months. Clear till here? Fine, I think fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Now again they said that the pricing can be determined as per section 3, subsection 2F, which we had seen. There were three things: first we will tell market price. Government says no, market price no, let's come to an agreement. So we can have an agreed price. But if the person doesn't agree, then you say forget it, this is the price. That's the controlled price. Clear till here?
Yes.
Yeah. Now government has also given two more provisions. One is for pricing, determining the pricing when you're procuring certain food grains and edible oil. So let's say if in case the government wants to procure food grains or edible oil, and down they've given for another category which is for sugar, fixing the price in case of sugar. So we have to decide that we have to pay a certain amount to the producer. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. So the government has just given down few points that we have to keep in mind before, since we are buying food grains, so we are buying the other counterparty is a farmer. So we can't be too harsh on them. We can't be too harsh that this is the control price. So they have said that keep certain factors in mind which they've given you before you're determining the price. So be fair enough as much as possible. So they go on to say the Essential Commodities Amendment Act 1976 inserted section 3B. So this is your section 3 subsection 3B. In substitution of that existing provision which was there, which it said the providing for payment of price for food grains, edible oils, oil seeds as specified by the state government with the approval of the central government. Now, any person who is required in terms of an order under section 3 subsection 2f, okay, so the government is determining the price in those three methods, and they are obliged, mandated to sell it to the government. Any grade of food grains, edible oil seeds, in which no notification has been issued, maybe notification is not issued in that, what is the price, then the price shall be paid irrespective of what is there, having regards to the following facts. So simple meaning that the price shall be paid with having regards to the following facts. So when the government has to buy all these food grains, edible oil, edible seeds, we have to give regards to the following facts. That is what is given here. Now, what are those facts? The control price if fixed by law, the general prospects of the crop, the general crop prospects, how much could it be sold for, the need for making such a grade of variety of food grains, edible oil, seeds available at reasonable prices to the consumers and vulnerable sections of the consumers, and the recommendation, if any, by the Agricultural Price Commission. Simply saying that when we are buying these food grains and the opposite side is a farmer, so if the control price is set by the government, then we will look at that. We'll keep a regards to that. We will look at the cross prospects. Tell me, is there grading of food quality also? When you have food, there are different grades of food also, or I can keep one price for all.
Those are different.
So there is different grades. So then they are saying that you should see what are the grade of the food. According, you have to give the pricing and see the recommendations by the Agricultural Price Commission. Same for sugar. Same for sugar. They have said that whenever government is trying to procure sugar from the producer, then again, if no notification is issued, okay, we have to give regards to the following. So the producer shall be paid such a price for sugar as the central government may order, having regard to the following. So the act is telling the government that please look at all these things before you fix a price. Do not kind of do injustice on the farmers as well. So the minimum price what has been fixed by the government, the cost that the person has incurred, the various taxes that he has to pay, and the securing a reasonable return for the capital employed in the business. So the manufacturer of sugar also must have invested a lot of money. So when you're taking away his goods, just see that he gets a fair price for the goods. Now, coming to the other part, which is about confiscation of essential commodities. Okay, you can mark this as important. This has been a part of your PEQ. It has come in your past examination question. Now, this talks about two things. This talks about two things. One is seizure and the other one is confiscation. Now, what is the difference between to seize and to confiscate? There is a difference or it's the same to seize and confiscate? Normally, people feel that it is interchangeable. Seizure and confiscation is the same. However, there is a difference. There is a difference. To seize means to take the possession otherwise to the contrary of the owner. So I try to take away the goods from you, so I have seized it from you. Confiscation is when the ownership will change. It is by a mode of a proper judicial process and which the government becomes the owner and they can seize it. So let me give you an example. Let's say if at your house there is a raid or there is a raid at someone's house. Raid. We feel, the officers feel that the goods and all of that we need to take it into custody. So will we seize or it will be called as seizure or confiscation? It will be called, when they seal everything, it's seizure or confiscation?
Seize, sir.
Seize. So in seizure, they will take the goods out of your possession. They will take the rights over it. They will say that we need to investigate. So can I say seizure comes first and then comes confiscation? So seizure simply means taking possession without owner's consent. Here in seizure, has the ownership changed? If I've just come and seized, you will go and talk to your lawyers. You will go and try to say that this seizure was illegal. I have ownership. Everything is correct. You would try to get back the goods. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the ownership does not change. Does not change. The person will litigate, will try to find and fight back and try to get his goods back. If the decision goes against him, let's say he lost the case and it turned out that all the goods that he was there were illegal. In that case, after the court's order, so after order of court, after the due process, then and you have lost the case, then can I say it is confiscation?
Yes.
So it's like a permanent transfer. Here the ownership changes. Ownership changes. It is towards the end of the suit. End of suit. This can be said at start of investigation. Is this clear? So first seizure comes, then a court case will happen. We know how long the court cases go. After that, if you won the case, there is a possibility in seizure that you get back the goods. If you win the case, there is a possibility that you get back the goods. Yes or no? Here you cannot get the goods. Cannot get goods back. Instead, it will be sold by the government. It would be sold by government. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is important to know. Okay, seizure and confiscation, pretty simple. Ownership aspect is there. Both possession is lost. The stage in what stage of the prosecution is happening. So let's see. When and in confiscation, the central government becomes the owner. The government becomes the owner, and then they will sell it off. So when an essential commodity is seized, okay, whenever they come, they have raided your godown, they will make a search memo. They will make a seizure memo that what all they have seized. a report of seizure shall be made and sent to the officer. Here, the officers are called as collectors of the district in which it has been seized. The collector may direct for production for the seized commodity before him. So he will say that bring the commodity before me. And if he is satisfied that the contravention of law is made, then if he is satisfied that the contravention is made, so if the court or the officer is satisfied that the offense is being done, then he will order confiscation. So can I say first there is a direction for seizure and then comes confiscation. Okay, clear till here? Now, before passing an order for confiscation, will the person be given an opportunity to fight his case, to defend himself? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Obviously, he would say that no, I'm not wrong. These are my facts. You got it wrong completely. It's a false complaint. I am completely innocent. And your lawyers will try to fight out and say that this seizure is wrong. The goods should be given back to us. Okay, so before passing of any confiscation order, the owner of the essential commodity, whatever it might be, a commodity, some package, or some kind of animal is there, you have it, or any other conveyance. Now, how does the animal also get confiscated? Sometimes you're taking the essential commodity on let's say bullock cart, it is being taken, or a hand cart, or on certain vehicle, and on that spot they realize that you have not taken the proper license to deal into essential commodity. So everything will be seized. So you will be called from any person who is seized, then a notice will be issued to him in writing informing him the grounds for which the confiscation is ordered, that we are ordering confiscation of these goods. Tell us why confiscation should not happen. It's called as show cause notice. A SCN will be issued to him. Okay, and they will give him a proper opportunity of being heard before the confiscation order is passed. If the confiscation order is passed and you are unhappy, then you can go and appeal within 1 month from the passing of the order to the state government. Okay, and then the state government can pass whatever order they want. Either they want to set aside the order, they want to pass a new order, they want to modify the order, or they want to confirm the order. So the state government can then confirm, modify, or annul means cancel the order given. Now coming to offences and penalties. The offences and penalties. Cognizance of an offence. Now cognizance, okay, so there are two things. The word cognizable and non-cognizable. We need to understand these are certain terms of the law of crimes. Law of crimes are nothing but your Indian Penal Code. So certain terminologies. Have you heard of cognizable, non-cognizable offences?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Now cognizable means here we are saying, which in the IPC, the CRPC, they simply said that what is shown as cognizable. But in simple words, I'll tell you in simple plain English, cognizable means a serious offense. Means what? A serious which requires cognizance, which requires alertness, which requires your attention. So a serious offense. So in the same way, non-cognizable will be a non-serious offense. Yes or no?
Yes.
So all the crimes have been divided into two categories. Either it is serious offense or it is a non-serious offense. So for example, drunken driving, serious offense. Murder, serious offense. All of this is a serious offense. However, if I just turns out that a simple hurt, you had a fight with, there is a road rage and there's two people fought and caught each other's collar. Is that a serious offense which requires police to investigate depth? Or they will say this is a NC will be issued. NC is non-cognizable. So it's a crime but a less serious crime. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. So in Essential Commodities Act, if you've done an offense, is it a serious offense or a non-serious offense? Should it be considered offenses? Any kind of violation of the Essential Commodities Act will be treated as cognizable or non-cognizable? What do you think?
Cognizable.
Cognizable. Now see, essential commodities, people need it on a daily basis and you blocked it. So it's going to create a big impact, and that is why the act has been made. So any offense under this act will be treated as cognizable. Normally, serious offenses will be bailable or non-bailable.
Non-believable.
Non-bailable. So can I say contravention of the Essential Commodities Act 1955 is cognizable and non-bailable?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what it is written under section 10. That every offense punishable under the act shall be cognizable and non-bailable. A cognizable offense is one in which the CRPC says that a police officer can arrest without a warrant. So, if you go under CRPC, they're simply saying that a cognizable offense is one in which the police officer can arrest you without a warrant. The next concept we'll be doing is of mens rea under section 6A and 7 of the Essential Commodities Act. Mens rea means a guilty mind. In criminal laws, a person can be tried and convicted only if he has mens rea. That means he should have the intention to do the act. If there is a bona fide act by the party and a offense is done, he cannot be punishable because his intention was not to do the crime. So, mens rea in both these cases, Natulal versus State of Madhya Pradesh, as well as in Hari Prasad Rao versus the state, it is said that mens rea is an essential ingredient of an offense under the Act. Simply stating that mens rea is an ingredient of an offense punishable under the Essential Commodities Act, simply an intentional contravention is punishable. If a dealer acted bona fide, then he will not be punishable. In Hari Prasad Rao, it was stated that mens rea as a constituent is a part of crime. An accused cannot be found guilty of an offense against criminal laws unless he has done it with a guilty mind. So, in criminal laws, you cannot hold a person accountable unless he has intention to do the crime. For example, a doctor trying to save the life of a patient. If the patient dies, the doctor will not be held liable because he did not have the intention to kill the person. He was trying to save the life of the person. Okay. However, there are exceptions to the mens rea also, where in criminal law deems that you have the intention, such as gross negligence, etc. In Essential Commodities Act, the law will be that the person will have to have the bad intention or it has to be proved. Now there are four stages of a crime. Now there are four parts of a crime. It all starts with, let's see whether you know the four stages of crime. Four stages of crime. Firstly, the accused would have the intention. Second, he would do some preparation. Third, he would attempt. And fourth is the actual commission of the offense. Actual commission of offense. Now, in criminal laws, the basic rule is that the first two stages are not punishable. If I intend to kill someone but I back out, I'm not. If I've not done any of the other stages, I will not be held liable. Preparation. Let's say I have bought a knife to kill someone, but I did not use it, did not attempt it. Again, I will not be held liable. But if you attempt to do it, like I shoot but I miss, still I can be held liable. And third, actual commission of an offense is obviously punishable. So in the general criminal law, general principle is that the first two stages are not punishable, whereas the last two stages are punishable under law. Next, they are talking of the concept of culpable mental state, which is synonymous to mens rea, which is similar to mens rea. Simply stating that in law, in Essential Commodities Act, as per section 10C, it will be assumed that the accused has a culpable mental state. Culpable means a guilty mental state. So he is guilty and he has the intention, will be presumed if he is accused under the crime. So what do you mean by culpable mental state? Culpable means a bad intention, a guilty mental state is presumed. So let's read what's given here. So section 10C provides that a presumption of culpable mental state, which means that he had the intention, he has a motive, he has the knowledge of the fact, and he has the belief of the fact. Everything will be presumed against the accused. So in certain crimes, presumption is that the person is a criminal and he has to prove his innocence. So this act is pretty harsh and pretty, you could say, in against the accused. It is provided that in any prosecution for an offence under the act which requires a culpable mental state on the part of the accused, now this is the scary part for the accused, the court shall presume the existence of the mental state. So it will be presumed that you have done the crime, and it is open to the accused to challenge it that and prove it to the law that he has no culpable mental state, or he doesn't have mens rea to commit the crime. Now this is done with the chapter, but also let me just bring out a certain important things, not important from exam point of view, but from general point of view. Now recently the government of India has passed the Essential Commodities Amendment Bill 2020. Now this was not taken this amendment was very much resented by the Indian farmers, and the farmers who had small farmers, like who did not have a lot of big farm, big land, big storage capacity, they objected to it. So let's see why. First, what was the amendment to the Essential Commodities Act? Let's see that. So what was the amendment exactly where the farmers are protesting? Let's understand that, and why are they protesting? Let's see. So the amendment is something like this. It's not yet, it has been passed by the Rajya Sabha, but it has been kept on hold due to the protest nationwide. So what is the amendment? Let's see. So as we know, food stuff, which include all these cereals, pulses, etc., all of them are essential commodities. So these were all being regulated and monitored by the government. So what the government has done, cereal, pulses, oil seeds, edible oils, onions and potatoes are removed from essential commodities. So they are no longer coming under the act. This is what they have said, that let's remove them from the list. Now this is the amendment, and this has created a hue and cry between the people. Let's see why. The law believes that if we have it decontrolled, it will attract money in the foreign direct investment, it will attract money in the private sector, since these commodities will not be heavily regulated by the government. They say that another thing is even the storage. Let me see. So government has also said that the storage etc. is deregulated. So one can hoard these goods. Normally, if hoarding of these goods today is not allowed. So let's say if I'm a big corporate and I want to hoard these goods, I want to buy it in bulk and keep it. So I am disallowed from doing that. Okay, because it came in the Essential Commodities Act and the distribution of it is mandatory. So government just remove them. Now with the removal, what will happen? People will be able to hoard it. People will be able to increase the prices of it. people will be able to deal with it just like any other commodity. They can create artificial scarcity, and they can raise the prices to suit their needs, as we see that happens in normal cases. What law is saying, if what the government feels that if they do that, there will be a lot of FDI in this sector. Since these are deregulated, they can have better profits, the companies. Now, what is happening? This is suited for corporate farmers. So corporate farmers will actually be having the storage capacity to store and hold goods, whereas small farmers will not be able to do it. So all the money will come to these corporate farmers. So it's actually, you could say, it is a move to benefit the agricultural sector, primarily the corporate farming. So let's see, since it is hoarded and it can be stored in large capacity, the consumers, that is you and me, can, whenever we want, it will be readily available, especially in cases of war, famine, extraordinary price rise, natural calamity. All of this we can procure it because it will be stored somewhere. Okay, it will help up investment in cold storage and modernization of the food supply. Since funds will come in, since we know that these can be hoarded, so corporates will make huge storage capacity, so funding will come for that. Will bring in price stabilization and prevent wastage. Normally what used to happen, if I couldn't store it, they used to try to sell it off, they would try to there would be a wastage, etc. So the objective of the government is to double up the farmers income. But the question is, the farmers who they are covering is actually corporate farming, corporate farmers, or simple words, big farmers who can afford hoarding, who can afford storage, who can all of those. So this maybe is not taken very positively by the small farmers, because they feel they might be hit, and that is the crux of it. And we will see how the government tries to resolve these differences and try to educate and get support from the farmers, and government coming to middle part with the farmers. So this is not required for you to know, but I've just put it down so that we come to know that Essential Commodities Act was amended, and what was the amendment, and what is the kind of both the sides viewpoints. That is it, we are done with the chapter.